Hello and welcome to our second Data Community podcast, where we're doing a series on the people who present our speakers. So today we have Juha Korpela, who's just done a fantastic presentation on semantics and ontologies and all kinds of good things there. And welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Would you
it was
like
really
to-
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a really good turnout.
Yeah.
Lots of good questions. Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to sort of do a deeper dive there into kind of the sort of things that we spoke about. There are quite a lot of questions around kind of implementation and of course AI as we'd expect. So my first question then is, I think a lot of this stuff, I think people would agree, is it sounds great and there's a lot of people who really want to do it, but in their organization, whether they're an employee of that organization or whether they're a consultant, they may be struggling to kind of get other people to listen to them about how important this stuff is, how it should really be done, how it forms a solid foundation. What would you say to those people who are maybe struggling to get people to listen, struggling to get their organization to see the value?
Yeah. This is a common problem, and I encounter this as well. And of course, we have to understand that in some organizations, you're still talking about figuring out BI, let alone AI, and you're going to have to work according to whatever the situation is on the ground. But I think this is a question of scaling. That everyone's doing now little AI POCs and pilots of what, and building individual little agents and so on and so forth. And at that stage, when you're building, the organization's first actual agent is going into production, it's perfectly fine that it has, its own little document storage somewhere where a bunch of files has been dropped and it's doing, vector RAG into that and figuring it out by itself. And then they create the second agent and they do the exact same. There's another little bunch of documents somewhere and they're doing RAG on that, and the agent has its own context for that purpose. No, okay, that's fine. And eventually you end up, with a bunch of agents doing all sorts of things. All of them have their little own, context repositories. And eventually, at least at the point when you have an agent that is supposed to do something cross-domain or cross-data sources, that it has to be able to combine information from multiple sources. At that point, you start figuring out, oh man, I wish this agent knew the things that the others know. And I wish it understood the world in which we live in and the systems, the data we have, the same way that, the specialized agents in that area. There's got to come to this point that actually we need to have something that combines those different sources of information, those different sources of context, and then acts as sort of shared knowledge repository for, not necessarily all of the agents. I mean, it's perfectly fine to have a very specialized thing working on its own context. But I think that as organizations create more and more of these solutions, what I explained in the presentation there about the sort of universal semantic layer, as it were, the knowledge plane, is basically the only way to scale. Otherwise, you end up having a million little silos with, they have nothing to do with each other.
And building something like that to start with, rather than creating 10 and then going, as you say, we've got a problem now, is you're much better off doing it that way and building. You can iterate on it because you might not get it right the first time. It's you can't necessarily see a path for integration until you have sort of 2 or 3 of these things. So you might start off with 1 or 2 and then realize you need to do a bit more to help integrate more, but you build on it and iterate on it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's perfectly fine to build silos in the beginning. You have to test these things out and see what works for you, what doesn't. But you have to be aware that you're building silos, and you have to have a vision that you are kind of iterating on, that I want our organization to go into that direction as we scale up, that that what the silos you're building right now are not going to be eternal. They're eventually going to be combined into something else, and you have a plan of how to get it into that direction. I think it's the same. It's always been the same with all sorts of data things, right? That we build these siloed data solutions that do siloed data integration into siloed reporting solutions and so on and so forth. And then at some point, someone says, "Oh no, we actually need a data platform." It's the same thing. Yeah. It's just now we're talking about semantics and metadata rather than kind of actual physical data.
Yeah, and if you know what you want to aim for long term, you might be able to build what you're building now with a bit more information, a bit more of the stuff that you know is going to stick around, so that it saves rework later, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the big thing that is missing now in many organizations is this idea of sort of semantic architecture, for want of a better word, that organizations don't necessarily have this vision of where they want to end up as an organization, what the overall architecture should look like from semantics management and semantics using point of view. And this has been the same with data for ages, and then organizations started creating kind of hiring data architects and creating, unified data platforms and figuring out sort of at enterprise level what the data places are in which you do this work. Now it's just not going to be the same with semantics.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it happened with the machine learning boom, however long ago, 5-10 years ago. And it's happening now in semantics and AI and all kinds of things. So it's a self-repeating cycle.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Which kind of leads me to the next thing, actually. So I actually did my degree sort of 7 or 8 years ago. My master's degree was actually on ontologies. So I built a visualization engine for OWL2, which is an ontology language, to basically view it as a graph. I was pretty proud of it, but looking back on it now, it was very simple. Wouldn't have actually been useful in an organization, but it was pretty cool. I didn't really go into as much depth as I would have liked to about what ontologies are, and I appreciate that you're by no means an expert, but you know more about it than I do, I would say. So let's say over the last 7 years or so, what do you think has changed with ontologies to make them more desirable and more viable? Like, why is there a bit more of a buzz about it now?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I started doing data modeling kind of seriously, maybe, 12 years ago, something like that, I learned a sort of very, very basic thing about, what an ontology is from a sort of computational perspective, that, it defines the things that you have, and all of those things are sort of unique, and that they have associations between them, and you define those associations and so on. So I kind of understood ontology as the sort of theoretical background to the data models that I was creating. I didn't go back then, and for many, many years, into the actual kind of notations or standards of, the syntax of it. So I knew nothing about, I knew that OWL exists and RTF exists, but I didn't know anything about how to use that syntax or how to, what we're going to do with those. I just knew that that's the sort of theoretical background. And I remember I was probably in some data vault training many years ago, and I was told that behind the data vault, there's kind of the idea of the ontology of the organization. And I said, well, I thought that makes a lot of sense, but then I learned very quickly that when I go talk with clients and, teams of business experts and data experts equally, that if I mention ontology, their eyes will glaze over. They'll all know, what is this sort of academic mumbo jumbo? I have no idea. Let's talk about databases rather. So I learned to avoid the old word as I do talk about data modeling. But then something did change, and I think, the whole ontology background obviously is in the semantic web ideas from the 90s. So the whole thing has been going on for a while, but it's been completely sort of separate from the data work that we do in the data business. There's sort of knowledge management, the semantic world, and then there's the data world. And they started coming together now because of AI, because the syntax and the standards of these sort of formalized ontologies, they formalize the exact stuff that AI needs. So the semantic information of what this thing is about and how it connects to other things, that is formalized in the ontology syntax. So why not utilize a syntax that someone else has kind of developed over decades, and it has all the possible libraries and support that you could possibly find. It's a ready syntax, just go and use it. So that's where I kind of came into this and started figuring out, okay, I need to learn this new language, all this new terminology and everything. It's been a learning curve, and as I'm not an ontology expert. I will never claim to be an ontology expert, but I'm sort of hoping that I know enough now that I can practically do something with those tools that the sort of semantic web knowledge management stack gives, and I know when to ask for help.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's the tale of as old as time of an old an old thing that suddenly finds a new purpose, right? And as I said there, I think one of the biggest issues with AI at the moment is context, is telling it about everything it needs to know to be able to make a decision, giving it that metadata. So ontologies basically codify that metadata and that context, and it's almost a perfect use case for it, right? As you say, so that makes perfect sense to me. Okay, so I think that almost leads me perfectly onto what you were saying about kind of tooling starting to mature a little bit, and as you mentioned in the main session, it's not quite there yet. So I think it'd be really interesting. Myself as a developer, I've seen quite a few tools. I've used quite a few tools. So, for example, there's the DBT semantic model feature, which is quite interesting. I've not had a chance to use it in great depth, but it looks quite good. What's your kind of opinion on the state of tooling for this kind of work at the moment?
Yeah, it's problematic. So it's problematic, not very mature, and I think way too much sort of platform specific right now. Let me explain what I mean by this. So from kind of semantics management perspective, let's for a moment, let's put aside all the semantic web tooling and all the knowledge management tools, because almost no one knows them in this business. But what we have in the data business is we basically have two things. We have, as you mentioned, these semantic layers built into DBT, built into Snowflake, built into Power BI, Looker, you name it. You have sort of this semantic layer things, and with heavy air quotes around the word semantic layer, which basically allow you to attach some semantical information into your technical data objects. So you have a column and you have a column description field, and you have a table and table description somewhere. So that's basically what they do. And obviously there's all sorts of virtualization, remodeling of data and so on and so forth. That's kind of what they do. That's one thing. And then we have data catalogs and all that stuff, which is metadata management purely. But the problem with metadata management tools like data catalogs is that they are focused first and foremost on managing technical metadata. And the semantical metadata, i.e. the glossaries, the taxonomies and so on, these are kind of bolted on to these technical metadata management catalogs. So on the other hand, we have platform-specific semantic modeling methods. Take Snowflake. I don't use these tools myself that much, but from my understanding and from all the demos and everything that I've seen, that you have those definitions, you have your models there, that's fine, and everything is nicely modeled. You know what customer lifetime value is, as long as your data is in Snowflake. And now you have a customer lifetime value in some Power BI report, or in Excel, or in your other data platform, because eventually you have, in any case, 2 or 3 platforms in the organization. And what is defined there in that tool's semantic model as customer lifetime value no longer has anything to do with Snowflake's definition of customer lifetime value. So you don't have technology agnostic semantics in these semantic layer tools. And that's what we need. We need technology agnostic semantics, because the AI doesn't necessarily know from which platform it should fetch that data. It just knows that it needs information about customer lifetime value. So if it's defined differently in different technologies, then that's no good. But on the other hand, then the data catalogs are not very good at dealing with the kind of ontology part of it. So many data catalogs, for example, allow you to have a business glossary. So you have a list of terms, you have definitions of those terms, and you are even able to link those business terms and definitions into kind of technical metadata objects. So the catalog is able to say that, okay, these 3 columns contain information about customer lifetime value. And the catalog is, even in the glossary, you're able to define what customer means. But hardly any catalog is able to let me know how customers are related to deliveries, because the connections within those terms in the glossary, inside the glossary, those are not modeled in the catalogs. It's just the whatever can be connected directly into metadata of the technical objects, that's in the glossary. But if you want to connect semantic objects to each other, then the glossary fails on that. So we don't have kind of connections between technical platforms on the other side, and we don't have connections between terms and business objects on the other side. And that combination just doesn't really work very well. So I'm hopeful that things will go forward. I don't know if there is really an incentive from the kind of data platform vendors and tool vendors like ETL tool vendors and so on and so forth, if there is really an incentive on their side to make that semantic information that they gather to be sort of cross-platform, technology agnostic. I'm not really seeing the incentive there. Data catalogs, I would presume, should be going into that direction. Some of them are going into that direction. I'm very happy to see kind of positive noises coming from certain vendors into space. But so far, the very few implementations, actual implementations that I've been involved in, that's basically just us building things into a graph database. You have Neo4j or Google Spanner Graph or something like that, and you build the whole thing from scratch. You take metadata from somewhere, you turn it into turtle files or something, and you upload that into your graph database. You find your agents there. That's all kind of DIY kind of building that is going on right now. I'm thinking the tooling has to go into that direction, but not yet.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I think it's almost the same problem that people have pre-data warehousing, or, before it was invented, but also in organizations where you have disparate, disconnected data, right? It's the same problem, but at a much higher level, where if you've got disconnected pools of metadata and concepts and they don't join up, you might have the same, the kind of perennial issue you have of different definitions of the same concept in different places if they're siloed, as we were talking about at the beginning. And I guess it's the same problem that data warehousing solves for data, but for the metadata side of it.
Exactly. We used to deal with data silos. Now we have to deal with metadata silos or semantic silos.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same problem all over again.
Yeah. Excellent. And that took us 10, 15 years to really properly solve if you do it right. So let's see how long this one takes.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's there needs to be an incentive to do it, and of course we'd all hope the incentive would be the end user, right? But it's not always the case. But yeah, no, I think, as you say, I'm seeing whisperings of it. So I think the beauty of the DBT implementation is they do have an API. You can get it out of it, but it's still, if you build it in DBT, it's still more or less, locked into DBT. You still need something to take it out and put it somewhere central, as you say, like a graph database or something. So yeah, but very interesting. We almost need like a simpler version of OWL 2 that kind of unifies and builds a metadata catalog behind the scenes. But I was thinking out loud, really. It's an interesting one. Yeah.
It is. I mean, regarding OWL and OWL 2 and everything, I think that the syntax is, it's complicated syntax. Actually, I'm a little bit worried that all the kind of actual ontology RDF standard syntax is so complicated. It's too verbose. It uses too many tokens. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that. But anyways, it is the standard that we have. It's standard that's good to use. There's kind of three different things perhaps that people are confusing. There's the standard into which the syntax in which we express some. So that's one thing. So you have your OWL and everything. That's very good. It's sort of solved. And then you have the technology platform into which you put that information, which basically is not very well solved yet. As I said, we might be uploading into a graph database. So we might have, turtle files or JSON LD files in which we have our semantics in perfect sort of syntax, but we still need to upload it in somewhere, so that it's centrally available, which, is currently just something that we build ourselves. But then there's a third thing, which is the actual content, the semantic content. What are the words and definitions that you have in that syntax? What are the words and definitions that you are actually uploading into your graph database? And I find it amusing, slightly frustrating that this third thing is the one that is least talked about, the actual content of that semantics. And the way I see it, from using conceptual modeling as means of discovering semantics, is me focusing on the content. I just want to find what the content is and then figure out, what's the syntax in which I want to express it and where do I want to upload it. But for me, the first problem is always figuring out what the actual content is, and that's not a technological problem. So I understand that it's not as sexy as, dealing with different, graph implementations or whatnot. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. It's the human bit, right? It's the someone somewhere, no matter how much you automate, it needs to give that first definition. Even if it's putting into an AI to generate those, someone needs to action that. And then you're going to have all different types of wording and layout. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And my good friend and Helsinki Data Week colleague Sade Haveri said we were doing podcast together a little while ago, and she said that regarding kind of AI generated ontologies or whatnot, that your organization's kind of actual business value and actual uniqueness is in your sort of own understanding of what you're doing. If the work that you are doing is not unique, then and you can just generate your ontologies with LLMs because it's so generic. Everything you do in that organization in terms of actual business is so generic that you can make do with standard ontologies and using AI to generate your terms and definitions. Then do you really have a good business model then? Because anyone else could do the same thing. It's the uniqueness of that information. It's the uniqueness of that information that's the most difficult piece of the puzzle to solve, because that's in people's heads and that's in some complicated strategy documents, and digging that out is the most valuable part of the semantics. A person is a human is a triple, but I mean it's not very useful for any organization, I think. Or a cat is a mammal.
Yeah,
that's generic information.
Yeah, even if you have a very similar business model to someone else, it might be that your differentiator is your insight into that, or your particular IP around how to solve that problem, right? That's the stuff you should be getting down into all of this semantics and concepts, right?
Yep, indeed.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Okay, well, those are all the questions I had. And I think we've really talked about a lot of great stuff here in a lot of detail. Was there anything else you wanted to add? This is your time. Would you want to advertise anything?
Maybe a couple of things. So I mentioned Helsinki Data Week. So I'm one of the founders of Helsinki Data Week event. So last week of October in Helsinki, Finland, we have a week full of data events, very cool speakers there. So please do come to Helsinki, everyone. Go to helsinkiDataWeek.com and get your tickets. There's only, most of that is free, and you just need to fly to Helsinki and enjoy Helsinki late October. It's dark and cold and miserable, but there's a lot of good data stuff coming. So that's advertising number one. Advertising number two is I'm going to be speaking at the Data Community Conference in early September. So that's going to be fun. Going to meet you there, hopefully face to face, I think.
Yeah, it'd be great. Good to see.
Yeah. And I will also be speaking at Data Mesh Live in Antwerp in June 10 to 12, I think it was. So if you happen to be in the Benelux during that time, come see me in Antwerp.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Juha. And it's been excellent to talk to you. And yeah, I can't wait to meet you in September. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you.